My wealthy father told my daughter Grandpa does not have time for you when she needed him most. I refused to let it go, so he threatened to destroy my career. He had no idea the evidence I had been collecting would send him to prison for 20 years. I am Claire Thompson. I am 38 years old, and my father will have all the time in the world to think about what family really means from his prison cell. It all started on what should have been an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. Kind of crisp autumn New England day that paints the world in brilliant oranges and reds. I was in my office at Thompson Family Therapy, the practice I had built from nothing after my father cut me off financially for choosing psychology over joining his investment firm. My daughter Lily, 8 years old, and the light of my life, was sitting cross-legged on the floor of my office, carefully coloring a picture while waiting for me to finish my last session notes. "Mommy, can we call Grandpa when we get home?" she asked, not looking up from her drawing. "I want to invite him to my school play." I am the lead tree. My heart sank. It had been over a month since my father had responded to any of Lily's messages. Each time, I watched her excitement slowly deflate as days passed without a response. The relationship was strained at best. My father had made it abundantly clear. He considered my career choice a disappointment, and his interest in his granddaughter seemed directly proportional to how useful she might be for a photo opportunity at a charity gala. "We can try, sweetie," I said, trying to mask the doubt in my voice. "But remember, Grandpa is very busy with his business." "But this is important," she insisted, with the unwavering conviction only children possess. I practiced my lines every day. I nodded, gathering my things as she carefully tucked her drawing into her backpack. It was a family portrait, Lily, me and my father standing together under a rainbow. My chest tightened at the sight of it. Children are remarkable in their capacity for hope. When we got home to our modest but comfortable suburban house, the one I had bought entirely with my own money, despite my father's predictions that I would come crawling back begging for help within a year, Lily raced to the phone. Father's number, the one he reserved for family, though family to Richard Thompson, was always more of a business asset than a source of love. To my surprise, he answered on the third ring. "Claire," he said, his voice as crisp and cold as the autumn air outside. He never bothered with warm greetings, viewing pleasantries as inefficient. "Hi, Dad," I replied, my voice automatically shifting into the careful neutral tone I had perfected over decades of walking on eggshells around him. "Lily would like to speak with you." Before he could object, Lily grabbed the phone, her face lighting up. "Grandpa, it is me, Lily. I am going to be in a school play, and I am the lead tree, and I have 14 whole lines, and I was wondering if you could come see me. It is next Friday at 6 o'clock, and Mom says we can save you a seat in the front row." The enthusiasm in her voice made my heart ache. I could hear my father's muffled response, though not the exact words. I watched as Lily's smile faltered, then crumpled entirely. But it is only 1 hour," she said, her voice small now. I practiced really hard. Another pause, and I watched my daughter's shoulders slump in real time. When she spoke again, the voice was barely a whisper. "Okay, I understand, Grandpa." She handed me the phone without looking at me, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Hey." I put it to my ear just in time to hear my father's irritated voice. "Claire, you need to stop putting these ridiculous expectations in her head. I run a multi-billion-dollar investment firm. I do not have time for school plays and crayon drawings. Tell Lily that Grandpa does not have time for this nonsense. I have a meeting with the Japanese investors. That is real responsibility, not playing dress-up as a tree." The dismissal in his voice was so casual, so practiced, that it was clear he saw nothing wrong with crushing an 8-year-old's hopes. It was the same tone he had used when he told me psychology was a hobby degree and that I was throwing away my potential to listen to people complain all day. "Dad." "She can hear you," I said, my voice tight with anger. "She just wanted you there for 1 hour." "Well, now she is learning about the real world," he replied without a hint of remorse. "The sooner she understands that time is money, the better off she will be. You are coddling her, Claire.
Ow.
Just like your mother coddled you, and look how that turned out." I felt the familiar sting of his disapproval, but this time it was different. This time it was not directed at me, but at my child. My beautiful, hopeful child who only wanted her grandfather to see her shine for 1 hour. You know what, Dad? Lily is the most important thing in my world, and if you cannot make time for her, that is your loss. A profound one. I could almost hear his eye roll through the phone. Save the therapy talk for your clients, Claire. I have to go. The Thompson name means something in this town, even if you have chosen not to uphold its legacy. The call ended, and I turned to find Lily gone from the room. I found her in her bedroom, carefully removing the drawing of our family from her backpack and slowly, deliberately, tearing off the figure of her grandfather before crumpling it up. "Lily," I said softly, sitting beside her on the bed. "I am so sorry." "Sweetheart, it is okay, Mom," she said with a forced smile that broke my heart. "Grandpa is important. He has important meetings with important people." The way she parroted his excuses made my blood boil. "Listen to me," I said, taking her small hands in mine. "Nothing, and I mean nothing, is more important than being there for the people you love. Not money, not business meetings, nothing. Your grandpa. He has forgotten that, and that is his mistake, not yours." She nodded, but I could see she did not fully believe me. How could she? Children measure their worth by how the adults in their lives treat them, and my father had just told her in no uncertain terms that she was not worth his time. That night after Lily was asleep, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, staring at the stars and feeling a cold resolve crystallize in my chest. This was not the first time my father had dismissed Lily, but I swore to myself it would be the last. The pattern was so familiar, the same emotional neglect I had experienced growing up now, being inflicted on the next generation. My phone buzzed. With a text from my brother Edward. "Heard you bothered Dad again with some school thing. Give it a rest, Claire. He is under a lot of pressure with the Nakamura deal." I did not bother responding. Edward was the golden child, the son who followed in our father's footsteps, who now served as CFO of Thompson Investment Group. He had always been our father's echo, amplifying his dismissals, justifying his coldness as just how successful people are. I was about to put my phone away when it rang. My friend Vanessa, who had been my roommate in college and remained my closest confidant. "Hey," I answered already, feeling some of the tension leave my shoulders just hearing her voice. "How did the big ass go? Is the mighty Richard Thompson going to grace an elementary school auditorium with his presence?" Vanessa knew all about my complicated relationship with my father. "What do you think?" I sighed. He told Lily, and I quote, "Grandpa does not have time for this nonsense." Vanessa's sharp intake of breath told me everything, to her face. "What kind of monster says that to a child?" "The kind who thinks the Thompson name is more important than the Thompson people," I replied, taking a long sip of wine. "That is it," Vanessa said, her voice hardening with protective fury. "I have kept my mouth shut about your dad for years because he is your father, but Claire, this has to stop. You cannot keep letting him hurt Lily like this." "I know," I said quietly, "and I will not." "What are you going to do?" I stared up at the night sky, feeling something shift within me. For years I had tried to maintain some relationship with my father for Lily's sake, believing that having a grandfather, even a distant one, was better than none. But I now understood that his conditional love was far more damaging than his absence would be. "I am going to cut him off," I said finally, completely. "No more chances, no more hoping he will change. Lily deserves better, and so do I, about time." Vanessa said softly, "I will support you whatever you need." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of the night thinking about what cutting off my father would really mean. It was not just about declining holiday invitations or screening calls. My father was a powerful man in our community with connections in every industry. He was vindictive and had never tolerated what he called disloyalty. When I left Thompson Investment Group to pursue psychology, he had tried to sabotage my graduate school applications. When that failed, he had attempted to dissuade clients from coming to my practice when I first opened. It was only my reputation and the genuine results I achieved with my patients that overcame his whisper campaign. Truly cut him off, especially in a way that publicly embarrassed him, he would retaliate. And this time, he might not stop at trying to harm my career. He might go after my custody of Lily, you see, My ex-husband James and I had divorced 3 years ago. While we shared custody, James had recently moved to London for work. My father had always preferred James, had even offered him a position at the firm after our divorce. If my father decided to, he could financially back James in a custody battle. It's claiming my modest income couldn't provide the stability that James's corporate salary could. The thought of Lily being taken away sent a cold spike of fear through me. But then I remembered her face when she heard her grandfather's dismissal, the careful way she had torn his image from her drawing. Some threats had to be faced head-on. I went inside and opened my laptop. For the next 2 hours, I documented every instance of my father's neglect, every canceled visit, every ignored call, every promise broken. I created a timeline of his relationship, or lack thereof. With Lily, it wasn't exactly a legal document, but it felt important to make it concrete. To see the pattern laid out in black and white. As I was about to close my laptop, an email notification popped up. It was from an unfamiliar address, me Hunter, at securityfirst.com. The subject line read, "Regarding Richard Thompson, urgent and confidential." My finger hovered over the delete button. My first instinct was that it was spam or a phishing attempt using my father's well-known name. But something made me click it open instead. "Dr. Thompson, my name is Marcus Hunter. I was head of digital security at Thompson Investment Group until my termination last week. I have information regarding your father's business practices that I believe you should be aware of. This is not a blackmail attempt. I have already secured a new position and want nothing from you financially. However, as a father myself, I believe families should know the truth about one another. If you're willing to meet, I'll be at Riverside. Coffee tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll be wearing a red baseball cap. Regards, Marcus Hunter." I read the email 3 times, my heart racing. It could be a trap, some kind of setup by my father to test my loyalty. It could be someone with a grudge trying to use me to get to him. But it could also be legitimate, and if my father was involved in something questionable, it might be the leverage I needed to ensure he couldn't interfere in my life or Lily's again. I replied with a single line, "I'll be there." Sleep eluded me that night. I kept thinking about Lily's crumpled drawing and my father's cold voice, saying he didn't have time for nonsense. I thought about all the times in my own childhood when he'd missed recitals, parent-teacher conferences, even my high school graduation, all because work was more important. How my mother had made excuses for him until her death when I was 16, after which he'd become even more distant, as if she had been the only reason he'd made even minimal efforts at parenting. Morning came, and after dropping Lily at school, with extra hugs and reassurances that I would be front row center at her play, I headed to Riverside Coffee. It was a small local place, the kind my father would never set foot in, preferring the exclusive clubs and restaurants where he could be seen with the right people. Inside, I immediately spotted a man in a red baseball cap sitting in the corner, a laptop closed on the table in front of him. He was middle-aged, with salt and pepper hair and the watchful eyes of someone used to observing rather than being observed. I ordered a coffee and approached his table. "Marcus Hunter," he nodded, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Dr. Thompson, thank you for coming." "Claire is fine," I said, sitting down. "And I'm not making any promises about believing whatever it is you're about to tell me." He smiled slightly. "I'd be concerned if you did. Healthy skepticism is appropriate, especially given the circumstances." He opened his laptop, but didn't turn it toward me yet. "What do you know about your father's work?" I shrugged. "The basics. Thompson Investment Group manages portfolios for high-net-worth individuals and corporations. They specialize in emerging markets and technology ventures. Beyond that, I deliberately stay out of it." Marcus nodded. "That's the public-facing side, yes. And for many years, that's all it was." He paused, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. "I was brought on 7 years ago to upgrade their digital security protocols. Your father was paranoid about corporate espionage, which isn't unusual in the financial sector, but—" I prompted when he hesitated. But I quickly realized that the extreme compartmentalization of information wasn't just about keeping competitors out. It was about ensuring that very few people within the company had a complete picture of certain transactions. Turned his laptop toward me, showing a complex flowchart of corporate entities, arrows connecting them in a web that made my head spin. About 5 years ago, your father began creating a series of shell companies, primarily in the Cayman Islands and Liechtenstein. Initially, I assumed it was standard tax avoidance, not exactly ethical, but common enough. But then I noticed unusual transactions that didn't align with client portfolios. My coffee sat untouched as Marcus methodically walked me through. What he had discovered: my father had been systematically siphoning funds from client accounts in small, nearly undetectable amounts. Over time, these small diversions had accumulated into millions. He showed me the digital trails, carefully obscured, but still visible if you knew where to look. Last month, I raised concerns with your brother Edward, Marcus continued. I thought, perhaps your father was acting alone, that Edward might be unaware. I was wrong. My stomach dropped. Edward is involved? Marcus nodded grimly. He called me into his office the next day, thanked me for my diligence, and said they would handle it internally. A week later, I was terminated for security violations, allegedly accessing files outside my clearance level. The very files that contained evidence of their fraud, I surmised. Exactly, they gave me a generous severance package, contingent on a non-disclosure agreement, which I signed. He held up a hand when I started to speak. The NDA covers company operations, not criminal activity. I'm legally protected as a whistleblower, so why come to me? I asked, finally taking a sip of my now lukewarm coffee.
What?
Why not go to the SEC or the FBI? Marcus closed his laptop and leaned forward. Because I did some research on you, Dr. Thompson. I know about your estrangement from your father. I know how he tried to sabotage your career when you chose your own path. I know about your daughter. No, my defenses immediately went up. Leave my daughter out of this. It's exactly why I came to you, he said earnestly. When I was fired, your father made a point of reminding me that he knew where my children went to school. It wasn't an explicit threat, but the implication was clear. Richard Thompson doesn't just ruin careers, he ruins lives when he feels betrayed. A chill ran through me. That sounded exactly like my father. I have a family to protect, Marcus continued. I can't be the face of this. But you're his daughter. You have access. Could get evidence I never could. And most importantly, you have motivation? What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, though I was beginning to see where this was headed. I'm suggesting that you gather concrete evidence of your father's financial crimes and bring it to the authorities. I can guide you on what to look for, but I can't be directly involved. I sat back, my mind racing. You're asking me to spy on my father? To actively work to send him to prison? Marcus met my gaze steadily. I'm asking you to consider what kind of man tells his granddaughter he doesn't have time for her, then threatens another man's children to keep his crimes hidden. I'm asking you to think about what he might do to your daughter if he ever saw her as an obstacle. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too close. I stood up abruptly. I need time to think. Marcus nodded, sliding a small USB drive across the table. This contains everything I've found so far. It's encrypted. The password is your daughter's birthday, which tells you how easy it was for me to get that information. Imagine what your father could do if he decided she was a problem. I took the drive, my hand trembling slightly. I'll be in touch. I left the coffee shop and sat in my car for a long time, my thoughts a chaotic swirl. This actively working to expose my own father's crimes? The rational part of me said to stay out of it, to protect Lily by maintaining our distance, but not poking the bear. But another part, the part that had watched my daughter tear her grandfather from her family drawing, whispered that distance wasn't enough. Yes. As long as Richard Thompson remained powerful, he would always be a threat to anyone who disappointed him, including his granddaughter. My phone rang, startling me. It was my receptionist. Dr. Thompson, I'm so sorry to bother you during your morning off, but Mrs. Keller just canceled her standing appointment for the next month. Actually, 3 other regular clients have called to cancel this morning as well. My blood ran cold. This was too much of a coincidence. Did any of them say why? I asked, already knowing the answer. No specific reason. They all just said something came up and they'd need to take a break for a while. I thanked her and hung up. My suspicions confirmed when my phone immediately pinged with a text from Edward. Dad wants to see you. His office. 2 p.m. today. Don't make him ask twice, Claire stared at the message, the implied threat unmistakable. My father was already moving against me, presumably because Marcus had been seen talking to me or because someone had reported our meeting. He was sending a warning shot across my bow, showing how easily he could damage my practice. In that moment, any hesitation I had evaporated. I replied to Edward with a simple, "I'll be there," then drove straight to my bank. I withdrew a significant amount of cash, enough to live on for several months if necessary, and opened a new account at a different bank, one with no connections to Thompson Investment Group. Next, I called my lawyer, Diane, an old college friend who had helped me with my divorce. "I need to talk to you about establishing some legal protections," I said when she picked up. "For myself and for Lily. Against my father." "Your father," she repeated, surprised. "What's happened? I can't go into details on the phone." "Can I come by your office?" "Of course. I'll clear my lunch hour." By the time I arrived at my father's gleaming downtown office building at 2 p.m., I had put several protective measures in place. Diane had helped me draft emergency custody papers that would ensure Lily stayed with my closest friend Vanessa if anything happened to me. I had documented my conversation with Marcus and secured the USB drive in a safe deposit box at my new bank. I had also called James, my ex-husband, and had a surprisingly supportive conversation. While he and I had our differences, he had witnessed my father's controlling behavior during our marriage and believed me when I explained that I was concerned about potential interference. He agreed to send an email to both our lawyers stating unequivocally that he had no intention of seeking full custody and would oppose any attempt by my father to influence our arrangement. Thompson Investment Group occupied the top 3 floors of one of the city's most prestigious office buildings. The reception area was all gleaming marble and hushed efficiency, with the company logo, a stylized T that resembled a mountain peak, prominently displayed behind the desk. The receptionist, a young woman I didn't recognize, smiled professionally. "Dr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson is expecting you. Top floor, end of the hall." The elevator ride gave me time to center myself. I wasn't the scared daughter anymore, desperate for approval. I was a successful professional, a mother with a child to protect. I had faced down far more intimidating situations in my therapy practice, helping clients through their darkest moments. I could face my father. The doors opened directly into a waiting area outside my father's office. His executive assistant, a severe woman named Ms. Winters, who had worked for him for decades, nodded curtly at me. "He's on a call. He'll be with you shortly." I sat in one of the sleek leather chairs, noting that nothing had changed since I'd last been here 5 years ago. The same tasteful and personal art on the walls. The same awards and citations in discreet frames. The same atmosphere of controlled power. After exactly 15 minutes, my father never saw anyone early. No matter how urgent the meeting, Ms. Winters received a call and then gestured to the imposing double doors. "Mr. Thompson will see you now." I walked into my father's corner office, a vast space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Richard Thompson stood with his back to me, gazing out at the empire he considered his domain. At 65, he was still an imposing figure, tall, straight-backed, with silver hair perfectly coiffed. He didn't turn when I entered. "Close." "The door, Claire?" he said, his voice as cold and commanding as ever. I did as instructed, then stood in the center of the room, refusing to take a seat without being asked. It was a small rebellion, but it made me feel stronger. "You had coffee with Marcus Hunter this morning," he said, still not turning to face me. It wasn't a question. "I did," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "He had some interesting things to tell me." Now he turned, his steel-gray eyes, so like mine, assessing me coldly. "Hunter is a disgruntled ex-employee who violated company policy. Nothing he told you has any basis in fact." "Then why am I here, Dad?" I asked. "Why call me in? Why pressure my clients to cancel their appointments?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he masked it. He hadn't expected me to make the connection so quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said dismissively, moving to sit behind his massive desk. I called you here because Edward mentioned your disappointment regarding the school play. I thought we should clear the air. I almost laughed at the transparency of the lie. The air is perfectly clear, you told my 8-year-old daughter, that you don't have time for her. That's your choice, and I've accepted it. What I won't accept is you interfering in my practice. My father's expression hardened. Your practice, he said, making air quotes with his fingers, exists because I allow it to. This town runs on connections, Claire. Connections that I control. I've been very tolerant of your little rebellion, but my patience has limits. Is that a threat? I asked, amazed at how steady my voice remained. It's a reality check. Whatever Hunter told you, whatever you think you know, pursuing it would be a serious mistake. For you and for Lily. There it was, the explicit threat I had been expecting. He was bringing Lily into this, just as Marcus had warned he might. You don't get to say her name, I said, my voice low but intense. You lost that right when you dismissed her as nonsense. My father sighed, affecting a disappointed look that had cowed me so many times in the past. Always so dramatic, Claire. Just like your mother. I'm offering you a simple choice. Forget whatever Hunter told you. Focus on your little therapy sessions, and everything continues as normal. Or pursue this misguided vendetta and discover just how quickly you're comfortable. Life can unravel. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see the towering figure of my childhood fears. I saw a man so consumed by greed and power that he would threaten his own granddaughter. I saw a criminal desperate to hide his crimes. I have to pick Lily up from school, I said calmly. We're done here. We're done when I say we're done, he snapped, a rare crack in his composure. You don't seem to understand the seriousness of your situation. Perhaps a more concrete demonstration is in order. He picked up his phone. Ms. Winters, please send in Mr. Delaney. The door opened moments later, and a man in an expensive suit entered. I recognized him immediately. Gregory Delaney, the chairman of the State Licensing Board for Mental Health Professionals. Claire, you know Gregory, of course, my father said smoothly. He was just telling me about some concerns that have been raised regarding your practice, something about improper billing procedures. Delaney looked uncomfortable, but nodded. We've received an anonymous complaint, Dr. Thompson. Normally we wouldn't act without investigation, but given the specific nature of the allegations, my father leaned back in his chair, a small, triumphant smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Gregory sits on the board of our charitable foundation. When he mentioned this situation, I naturally expressed my concern. Family matters aside, professional integrity is paramount. The message couldn't have been clearer. My father was prepared to use his influence to trigger an investigation into my practice, one that would be disruptive and potentially devastating even if ultimately nothing was found. I looked from Delaney to my father, a strange calm settling over me. This tactic, this blatant abuse of power, only confirmed everything Marcus had told me. My father was exactly the kind of man who would steal from clients, threaten employees, and use his own granddaughter as leverage. Thank you for the warning, Mr. Delaney, I said politely. I keep meticulous records and welcome any review of my practice. Now, if you'll excuse me, I really do need to pick up my daughter. My father's smile faltered slightly at my lack of panic. Think carefully about your next steps, Claire. Very carefully. I walked out without another word, my mind already racing ahead to what I needed to do next. My father had just shown his hand. He was willing to use every connection, every ounce of his influence to silence me, which meant that whatever Marcus had discovered was even bigger than he had suggested. As I drove to Lily's school, I made a decision. I would protect my daughter. And the only way to truly protect her from Richard Thompson was to make sure he never had the power to hurt anyone again. That evening, as Lily practiced her lines for the play, I sent a text to Marcus Hunter. I'm in. Tell me everything. The Cold War with my father had just turned hot, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to win. Not just for myself, but for Lily, for Marcus's children, and for every person my father had ever used and discarded in his relentless pursuit of wealth and power. What I didn't know then was that the evidence I would uncover in the coming weeks wouldn't just send my father to prison for financial crimes. It would expose a decades-long pattern of corruption, blackmail, and even violence that would shock our entire community to its core. The next morning, I woke before my alarm, my mind already racing with plans and contingencies. As I watched the sunrise paint golden streaks across my bedroom ceiling, I realized that this confrontation with my father had been inevitable since the day one chose my own path over his. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Lily, who had crawled into my bed sometime during the night. Her small body curled trustingly against mine. Looking at her peaceful face, I felt that fierce, protective love that had become the compass of my life since the moment she was born. My father might be powerful, but he had never known the kind of strength that comes from loving someone more than yourself. In the kitchen, coffee brewing, I opened my laptop and saw an email from Marcus Hunter with a simple message. Secure messaging app instructions attached. Download before noon. I followed his detailed instructions for installing an encrypted messaging platform, creating an account under a pseudonym, and enabling all security features. By 9 a.m., we had established contact. First rule, Marcus wrote, assume all standard communications are compromised. Your father has people at the phone company, at major internet providers, possibly even in local law enforcement. That seems paranoid, I replied. I was his head of security for 7 years. Trust me, it's not. The man has contingency plans. For his contingency plans, as Marcus laid out the scope of what we were dealing with, I felt a strange doubling of my reality. On one track was my normal life, getting Lily ready for school, seeing my clients, grocery shopping. On the other was this shadow world of corporate espionage, financial fraud, a father who was apparently far more dangerous than I had ever realized. But to truly understand how I found myself in this position, secretly investigating my own father for crimes that would eventually send him to prison, I need to take you back. To show you the pattern that had been there all along, hidden, in plain sight. I was born into privilege, though I didn't recognize it as such until much later. Our family home was a sprawling colonial on 5 acres, with a live-in housekeeper and a gardener who came 3 times a week. My mother, Elizabeth, was the daughter of old money, gracious and gentle, a patron of the arts who served on numerous charity boards. My father, Richard, was new money, brilliant, driven, and utterly convinced that his financial success was evidence of his moral superiority. My earliest memories are of watching my father from a distance, like a cold and glittering star that illuminated our lives but remained forever out of reach. He was rarely home, and when he was either working in his study where children were expressly forbidden, or hosting business associates for dinner parties where my brother Edward and I were expected to make brief, polished appearances before being whisked away by the housekeeper. Edward, 3 years older than me, understood the rules of our household early. He mimicked our father's mannerisms, expressed interest in the stock market at age 10, and carefully cultivated the appearance of the perfect heir. I, on the other hand, was more like my mother, empathetic, creative, drawn to people rather than numbers. Your sister is too soft. I once overheard my father tell Edward when I was about 9. The world will eat her alive if she doesn't toughen up. The memory of that moment standing frozen outside my father's study, hearing him dismiss me so casually, came flooding back as I read through the documents Marcus was now sharing with me. The same cold calculation that had allowed him to assess his own daughter as deficient had enabled him to systematically defraud clients who trusted him. My phone pinged with a text from Vanessa. You okay? You seemed really off yesterday. I hesitated, then responded, working through some family stuff. Tell you soon. The fewer people who knew what I was doing, the better. Even Vanessa, who I trusted implicitly, was safer in the dark for now, according to Marcus, my father's financial schemes had begun relatively small about 15 years ago, around the time of my mother's illness. Elizabeth Thompson had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of ovarian cancer when I was 14. For 2 years, our family had lived in the shadow of her disease, watching her fade from the vibrant, gentle force who had buffered my father's coldness into a ghost who drifted through our home on a cloud of pain medication. During those 2 years, my father had been notably absent, always at the office, always securing our future while my mother died. I had resented him deeply for it, but now I wondered if there had been more to his absence. Had the financial fraud begun as a way to pay for experimental treatments? Had it started with something almost noble before corrupting into pure greed? I asked Marcus about the timeline. The earliest suspicious transactions I found were from 2010, he confirmed. But the system was overhauled before I arrived, so there could be earlier activity I can't see. 2010, the year after my mother died. Did whatever his initial motivations, by then, it had nothing to do with saving her. As I delved deeper into Marcus's files, a disturbing pattern emerged. My father hadn't just been stealing from faceless corporate accounts. He had specifically targeted clients who were vulnerable in some way. Elderly investors with limited financial literacy. Recent widows managing money for the first time, even a children's cancer charity whose board he sat on. He specifically went after people who trusted him completely, I noted to Marcus. People who wouldn't question his decisions or scrutinize the paperwork too closely. Classic predator behavior, Marcus replied. He selects targets he knows won't fight back. The words sent a chill through me. Wasn't that exactly how my father had always operated in his personal life too? My mother had never questioned his absences or his decisions. Edward had learned early to agree with everything our father said. And I had been cut off the moment I showed independence, when I was 18 and preparing for college. There had been no question in my father's mind that I would follow the path he had laid out. Economics at his alma mater. Followed by an MBA, followed by a position at Thompson Investment Group. It's all arranged, Claire, he had said one evening, not looking up from his newspaper as he delivered this pronouncement about my future. Dean Harrington owes me a favor. You'll be admitted regardless of your test scores, though I expect you to maintain the Thompson standard of excellence. I had been standing in the doorway of the living room, a brochure for a psychology program clutched behind my back. For weeks I had been trying to find the courage to tell him that I had different plans, different dreams. Dad, I had said, my voice embarrassingly small, I've been thinking about studying psychology instead. The newspaper had lowered, revealing his incredulous expression. Psychology? The way he said it made it sound like I'd suggested becoming a carnival fortune teller. I think I'd be good at it, I had continued, gaining a little confidence. My guidance counselor says with my empathy skills and analytical abilities? Absolutely not. He had cut me off. Psychology is a soft science at best, a complete waste of time at worst. No daughter of mine is going to spend 4 years learning how to listen to people complain, only to graduate and earn less than our housekeeper. My mother, arranging flowers at the side table, had given me a sympathetic look but said nothing. She never contradicted my father in front of us. It's what I want, I had insisted, a rare moment of defiance. I think I could really help people. My father had folded his newspaper deliberately and fixed me with a cold stare. This discussion is over, Claire. You will study economics. You will join the firm. If you want to help people, you can join your mother's charity committees and write checks from your substantial salary. I had fled to my room in tears, where Edward had found me later. Just do what he wants, my brother had advised, awkwardly patting my shoulder. It's easier that way. Once you're established at the firm, you can take some psychology courses. On the side if you're still interested, but I couldn't do it. Perhaps it was my mother's recent death making me acutely aware of life's brevity. Or perhaps it was simply that core of stubbornness my father so often criticized, but I applied to psychology programs in secret. When the acceptance letter came, from a prestigious university across the country, I finally worked up the courage to tell him. The explosion had been nuclear. He'd called me ungrateful, foolish, and hopelessly naive. He had threatened to cut me off financially. When I stood my ground, he had followed through on that threat with chilling efficiency. By the time I arrived at college, my tuition fund had been emptied, my credit cards canceled, and my phone cut off. It had been the most terrifying and liberating moment of my life. It's terrifying because I was suddenly completely on my own at 18. Liberated because for the first time I was free of his crushing expectations and icy disapproval. I had worked 3 jobs while maintaining a full course load. I had taken out student loans. I I had lived on ramen and coffee and sheer determination. And I had graduated with honors, gone on to get my PhD, and built a successful practice specializing in treating trauma survivors. Every step of the way, I had proven my father wrong, but the cost had been our relationship, and later, Lily's relationship with her grandfather. Now, sitting at my kitchen table with evidence of my father's crimes spread across my laptop screen, I wondered if that had been a blessing in disguise. What values would Lily have absorbed from a man who stole? From cancer charities? My phone rang, startling me out of these thoughts. It was Dr. Winters, Lily's pediatrician. Dr. Thompson. I'm calling about Lily's appointment tomorrow. I'm afraid I need to reschedule. Her school physical? But it's been on the books for months, I said, immediately suspicious. There was an uncomfortable pause. Yes, well, something's come up. My receptionist will call you to find another date. Before I could respond, she had hung up. This was no coincidence. My father was already making good on his threats, using his connections to disrupt even my daughter's medical care. I called Marcus immediately. We need to move faster. He's already interfering with Lily's life. We need to be careful, Marcus cautioned. Rushing could tip him off or lead to mistakes. What we need is access to the internal servers at Thompson Investment. And how exactly do we get that? I asked. Frustration building? I can't exactly walk in and ask for a tour of the server room. There was a long pause. There might be a way, Marcus finally said. Your brother Edward still trusts you, doesn't he? I laughed bitterly. Edward doesn't trust anyone except our father, but he wants to, Marcus insisted. I've watched him at company functions. It's the way he talks about you. There's resentment, yes, but also admiration. He respects that you stood up to your father, even if he'd never admit it. I thought about my complicated relationship with my brother. Growing up, Edward had been my protector when our father's disapproval became too crushing. He had taught me to ride a bike, had threatened to beat up my first boyfriend if he hurt me, had snuck me ice cream when I was sick. But as we grew older, the weight of our father's expectations had changed him. Edward had become more distant, more like our father, calculating every move, measuring every relationship by its potential value. By the time I left for college, the warm, protective, big brother of my childhood had been all but replaced by a Richard Thompson clone. Our adult relationship consisted mainly of tense holiday dinners before I'd cut those off too, and the occasional message relayed through his assistant. The last time we'd had a real conversation was at my wedding to James 6 years ago, when Edward had gotten drunk and confessed that he sometimes envied my freedom. You really think I can get to Edward? I asked Marcus. I think it's worth trying. And there's another angle we should consider, Marcus added. Your father's executive assistant, Ms. Winters. The Ice Queen, I said incredulously. She's been his loyal guard dog for decades. Yes, but did you know she raised a grandson by herself? He's at Stanford now, pre-med. She has a photo of him on her desk that she changes every semester with his latest school picture. I was confused. Now, how's that relevant? Because Thompson Investment Group administers the scholarship fund that's paying for his education, Marcus explained. A scholarship that could theoretically be revoked at any time if your father deemed Ms. Winters disloyal. The realization dawned slowly. You think he's controlling her through her grandson? I think your father ensures loyalty through a combination of financial incentives and implicit threats. Ms. Winters may not even consciously recognize it as leverage. But on some level, she knows her grandson's future depends on staying in your father's good graces. I thought about this, remembering the stiff, formal way Ms. Winters had always treated me. How she had never quite met my eyes when I visited the office. Had that been guilt? Had she seen herself as complicit in my father's? Emotional manipulation? So what's the plan? I asked. I doubt Ms. Winters is going to turn on my father after all these years. Scholarship leverage or not. No, Marcus agreed. But she might make a mistake if she's worried about her grandson, and Edward might let something slip if he thinks reconnecting with you could benefit him in some way. I sat back, considering the possibilities. My father had always pitted Edward and me against each other, ensuring we never formed a united front against him. It was a classic divide-and-conquer strategy. What would happen if I disrupted that dynamic? I'll reach out to Edward, I decided. but I need to be careful. If he suspects anything, he'll go straight to our father. Over the next week, I laid the groundwork. I sent Edward a carefully casual email mentioning that Lily had been asking about her uncle lately and wondering if he might like to have lunch sometime. To my surprise, he responded almost immediately, suggesting a date the following week. Meanwhile, I followed Marcus's instructions for documenting everything my father did to interfere with my life. The canceled doctor's appointment was just the beginning. 2 more clients canceled therapy sessions. The coffee shop where I sometimes worked suddenly couldn't find my regular reservation. My mortgage company called about a problem with my last payment, though the money had definitely left my account. None of these things were catastrophic on their own, but together they created a clear pattern of harassment. A pattern that would help establish motive when we eventually took evidence to the authorities. The day of my lunch with Edward, I dressed carefully in a conservative blue dress that reminded me of something our mother would have worn. I chose a restaurant I knew he liked, an upscale steakhouse, where our father often conducted business lunches. Edward was already seated when I arrived, looking every inch the successful executive in his tailored suit. At 38, he had our father's height and commanding presence, but his features were softer, more like our mother's. As I approached, I caught a flicker of genuine pleasure in his eyes before his expression settled into its usual, careful neutrality. "Claire," he said, standing briefly as I took my seat. "You look well?" "So do you," I replied, though in truth he looked tired, with shadows under his eyes and new lines around his mouth. "Thanks for making the time," a waiter materialized. To take our drink orders, sparkling water for me, scotch for Edward. When we were alone again, an awkward silence fell. So Edward finally said, "Lily's been asking about me?" "She has," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Lily occasionally did ask about the uncle she barely knew. She's at that age where family becomes more important. She's been drawing family trees at school, asking questions about Mom. Edward's expression softened slightly at the mention of our mother. "What do you tell her?" "That her grandmother was kind and beautiful and would have adored her," I said honestly. "That she had your eyes and my laugh." Edward nodded, taking a long sip of his scotch. "And what do you tell her about Dad?" This was delicate territory. "The truth, in an age-appropriate way. That her grandfather is very busy and important, but that doesn't mean he doesn't care." Even as I said it, the lie tasted bitter. My father had made it abundantly clear that he didn't care about Lily beyond how she might be useful to him someday. Edward studied me over the rim of his glass. "You're a good mother, Claire. Better than I expected, honestly." "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, keeping my tone light despite the insult. He shrugged. "You were always so idealistic. I worried you wouldn't be practical enough for the realities of parenthood. But you've built a good life for her, even without family support." It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get for his complicity in my estrangement. I decided to accept it as such. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." Ordered food and the conversation shifted to safer topics: Lily's school achievements, Edward's recent vacation to Japan, a movie we had both coincidentally seen. It was almost like having my brother back, the real Edward who existed somewhere beneath the corporate mask. As dessert arrived, I carefully steered the conversation toward work. "How are things at the firm? Still enjoying the CFO position?" A shadow crossed his face. "It has its challenges." "Such as?" I prodded gently. Edward hesitated, twirling his fork absently. "The regulatory environment is complicated these days. Compliance requirements keep changing." It wasn't what he said, but how he said it, with a note of genuine anxiety that caught my attention. This wasn't just corporate griping. He was worried about something specific. "That sounds stressful," I said sympathetically. "Is Dad handling it okay?" He never did like anyone looking over his shoulder. Edward gave a short, humorless laugh. "That's an understatement. He's been on edge lately, more controlling than usual." "Controlling how?" "Compartmentalizing information to an extreme degree. Requiring personal approval for transactions he used to delegate. Screening all my calls, all my emails." Edward ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from our childhood. "It's like he doesn't trust anyone anymore. Not even me. I maintained a carefully concerned expression while my mind raced. This was valuable information. My father was getting paranoid, which meant he might start making mistakes. That doesn't sound like him, I said, feigning confusion. Dad's always been controlling, but he's also always been confident. What changed? Edward looked around the restaurant as if checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned forward. About 2 months ago, we lost a major client, the Whitmore Foundation. Almost $1 billion in assets under management. Just gone. Transferred everything to Goldman Sachs overnight. Did they say why?